I'm Tory Gray, and this is SEO in 2025.
Tori, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
I would love SEOs to get a little bit out of the SEO silo and spend a little bit more time on platforms like TikTok, like YouTube, Reddit, or Pinterest, and really understand how users are behaving there and use that data to inform their search strategy in terms of their content, what users are really loving and engaging with, and speak to that in their content and in their campaigns.
Interesting. So you're using what users are doing on these platforms and what content they're consuming to perhaps give you greater keywords or content ideas that you can utilize in your own site.
Absolutely. So what things do users care most about? What are their opinions? How many of them care about it, right? Like what is the count of the hashtags of keywords? You can come up with sort of the social metric equivalent of all these metrics that we have for search. How much is it trending? I heard a great stat that if something is trending on TikTok, we're going to see that happen in 2 weeks on Google. So suddenly
Wow.
we go from like a zero search volume kind of term. We can figure out what's coming. We can get ahead of the trends and understand what people are seeking in order to create that content in a timely manner and be prepared to rank for it once people do start searching for it.
So how do you know which trends on TikTok to pay attention to?
It depends on certainly your industry, but you're going to see there's native tools within the advertising platform in TikTok. There's a TikTok trends report that you can see. So you're looking at your industry and you're seeing what are people engaging with? What are the sounds? What are the topics they're saying? Are they frustrated? Are they excited? It's just like an SEO keyword, right? Like, what do we do with this now? You can take that as data to say, this is what people are talking about. Do we want to talk about this? Is this relevant to our industry? So you're going to have to marry it to your own business strategy and your industry to make sure it's in alignment. But once you have those two things, I think you have an interesting platform to move forward on.
So are you advocating for brands to also be on platforms like TikTok, or we're not necessarily talking about that? We're just talking about it, using it as a data source.
All of the above, but as a search firm, we're using it primarily for data to inform SEO, but frankly, your broader marketing strategy and brand strategy as a whole. Really understanding what of your industry, what are users frustrated with? That can help you have data about what tooling are you going to build to solve those problems, right? I think there's a reason Google's obsessed with Reddit these days. I think we thought we saw the height of Reddit, and then, mid-month in August of 2024, suddenly we saw a huge shift up in like 200% increased awareness. Like more visibility for Reddit. Google's obsessed for a reason. People are very into UGC, perhaps as a way to counter AI content, perhaps. And they really are seeking that real authenticity. And I think that means that people are there. So should you as a brand be there? I think it's something you should strongly consider and perhaps showing up there. But at minimum, I think monitoring what's happening and using that insights, because that's where people are talking about the things that they care about.
So what is your approach from deciding that something on TikTok has legs and is worthwhile creating a piece of content for on your own website? How do you actually decide on the style of content that needs to be on your own site? I mean, is it similar to the content that you see on TikTok, or do you completely change the styling and how it's portrayed and what's in there because on your own website?
So there's a few different things. On TikTok, for example, there can be what they call sounds. So there can be like little quips. So the demure trend was very popular in 2024. And so it was a way to add sort of a funny, fresh bent on an existing piece of content. So you could frame your social posts around that, but you could also, if we're talking about distribution for an existing piece of content, right? So you have an existing post. Maybe you're not even going to change that individual piece, but maybe you're going to frame how you share that piece to make it relevant and hot and timely by using that updated sound. So that's something you can do. Or if users are, say, frustrated with a particular problem and your, say, direct-to-consumer product solves that, you can emphasize that because you know that that's a topic. Like, hey, guess what? We solved this. So suddenly it's a blog post that explains and connects the dots why your product resolves this thing that they're frustrated with.
And is YouTube the same as TikTok, i.e., does it tend to have content on there before it's discovered on Google?
Not as trending viral as TikTok. No, I think YouTube's still a great source of information. It tends to be a pretty different audience. Demographically speaking, it is older. It is a little bit more education and research based. So it's less how we use it for trends, and where are we going to look often depends on what is our client's kind of demographic profile. Who's their persona? Where do we look based on, are we looking at the right people and what's meaningful to them?
And Reddit, what kind of data are you looking for from Reddit?
Oh, goodness, all kinds of things. So we can do, say, a sentiment analysis of, are people talking about this subject? Are they frustrated about it? Are they happy about it? How frustrated are they about this particular topic? And are they digging in? We get information about how do they speak? Just like we use SEO keywords to say what are the keywords that our consumers are using, we can see that happening in real time in Reddit. And if we also, really analyze, how did this change? How did this change in the last 6 months relative to what people were talking about before in our industry? Then you can really understand these are the new topics. So that's new topic creation, or that can be a way to potentially add, say, information gain to existing content. So if you want to go update an old post, what's the new and updated information that you should consider adding to it? Well, what are people talking about on Reddit about that topic now that they weren't before?
And do you also analyze audiences? Do you try and see which audiences are talking about certain topics on Reddit or perhaps even on TikTok, and then decide to focus upon that content for your site because you know that your own audience is likely to be quite similar?
So I think we pull up and say, like, where are people talking about this period? And then we can do some digging to say what kind of people are talking about this, and is this our target audience or not? So we've certainly found cases where, for instance, we were vetting, do we want to brand a particular agency around a specific, they had a storytelling framework, is an example here. And what we found is that most of the people talking about this framework were people in the industry. So there were other professionals seeing, do they want to go and be certified in this specific way to do storytelling or not? So they eventually opted to not brand themselves as that kind of agency because that wasn't going to pull customers in. That was going to pull in essentially competitors, right? Or other people who in their industry. It's not like Facebook or LinkedIn where you might say your role or your job. So people don't always put that information out there to the same degree, but you can often tell based on how they're talking about it. And if you could do that sentiment analysis and look for those keywords and kind of disambiguate between who is who, you can get some really interesting insights.
Great. You mentioned keywords there, but when you're actually dealing with content that's cutting edge, that maybe hasn't been that prominent before, does keyword research really matter that much? Because you're probably not going to get that much search volume.
Well, you can always look at the rate of growth, right? And it certainly depends on the industry. So SEO has been talked about on Reddit forever. That there are subreddits that discuss that, but there's new topics within SEO. So people are still talking about link building on Reddit. And so there's plenty of volume, plenty of like hashtags that we can see on YouTube that people are still talking about link building. More people maybe or adding more videos about it, or less people are adding videos about it. And then what are the related hashtags on those videos that are talking about link building? Then we can see how that's evolving. So we might see a growth in a specific kind of tactic around link building, for example, that videos that have both, we can understand how that changes.
Great. Okay. And I'm just trying to think about the type of content that you're trying to create as a result of the research that you're doing, the data that you're finding. And I'm imagining that you could even create a video show or a podcast or some kind of discussion about what you're discovering here in these social platforms.
Absolutely. I think honestly, the sky is the limit, and it's really your imagination of what are you wanting to create, because SEO content can and should be more than blogs. It should be some of these other content types. And I think you can absolutely use it to inform those types of content creation as well.
I mean, the challenge tends to be what to actually do, because there are so many options nowadays, aren't there? You can research, you can find so many different options on these social sites, through your keyword research, but you only have so much time in the day. How do you recommend prioritizing things when perhaps a more traditional approach will show you that you've got maybe 1,000 searches per month for a particular keyword phrase, and then you've got another topic that you've uncovered maybe on TikTok or Reddit that doesn't have any obvious search volume. How do you justify focusing on that than something else that appears to be a little bit more tangible in organic search possibilities?
Yeah, I think that depends on the stage of the business you're in and the maturity of your SEO program. Have you already covered the basic topics? And have you done analysis in order to determine maybe your page on link building isn't doing as well as it used to, and you want to update that? So that's where I think that information can come in handy. What are the new trends that people are discussing? Are these new tactics of ways to go about that we can get the ideas for? I think it can be really, really tangible. So if a business is earlier stage and they're trying to figure out, okay, we want to do everything, they can decide if they want to go after the 1,000 keyword term. I think competition would also come into play, and how quickly they can move against this sort of content. So if you're talking trend content, there's going to be a lot of trends and those are going to change over time. So are you going to have those capabilities in-house? Do you have the skill set in-house to do that effectively quickly enough for that to be meaningful? Then sure, go after that. Do you have capabilities to do SEO content long form great in-house? Then sure, you're going to prioritize that. So it's just how you prioritize anything, frankly, even in SEO.
I like the way that you talk about the search behavior pie. What do you mean by that? Do you mean that users are a little bit more fickle nowadays, and they're maybe on your website one day and then on a social platform and then back in your website? Or is it just a change in approach? Yeah.
It's a great question. Yeah. Search behavior is evolving really quickly. And I think we as SEOs can get kind of up in arms. I remember the Twitter and LinkedIn fight about that TikTok's not a search engine. That is correct definitionally, but that doesn't change the fact that users are treating it as a search engine, and they are engaging in search behavior on TikTok because they can search for things. They are also engaging in traditional like social consumption behavior on their For You page, but they're also actively seeking out information. They're seeking out things to do on vacations. They're seeking out things about their hobbies that they like. So on YouTube, same deal. People will search. It's not a search engine because you're only searching within YouTube and it's not searching the web as a whole, but that doesn't matter. Search behavior is changing, especially for the youth, and they get their information from a lot of different places. And so I advocate for going where the users are and learning from them wherever that may be.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
Ooh, okay. Loaded question. So I'm going to say something maybe, we'll see how this is responded to, but there's certain shiny objects that I see in the industry right now. Obviously, Google is doing a lot of algorithm updates, and I think it's important to monitor those. Don't get me wrong, but I think really stressing about each and every update instead of looking at the long-term big picture is maybe not the best use of your time, especially if you're a brand that doesn't necessarily ebb and flow with those algorithm updates. There's brands that do and should focus on that, but if you're not flopping all the time, then maybe instead of agonizing about it, doing that. I would also say something like an AI search engine. So everyone wants to talk about how do I show up in the perplexities of the world and the other AI search engines. Meanwhile, those search engines don't get a lot of traction. Like they don't have enough users yet to be meaningful. So again, I want to be where the users are. When AI search engines have enough users that they're driving meaningful traffic to my site, I absolutely want to pay attention to those. But in the meantime, users are already engaging again in search behavior on YouTube, on Reddit, on TikTok. So I'm going to go to where the users are and get the data from there.
Are AI search engines ever going to drive meaningful traffic? Are they not going to just keep the traffic for themselves and just deliver your content to the users?
Maybe. I think they have to if they want to start competing with Google in a meaningful way. but we'll see how their training model goes. I don't know. I don't think there's any clear winners, and none are moving meaningful traffic. I think AI has some growing to do to make that useful for users. There's only so many use cases where the answers actually fit your need.
And there are also loads of algorithm updates nowadays, sometimes more than one a week. So obviously, you're saying, don't get distracted just by focusing on every single update and what's happening, why it's happening. But when do you know which one to pay attention to? Is it just the ones that actually affect your site in some way?
That is a much harder question. I'd say always monitor your data and always be digging in. Because yes, if you do see a drop, then you do need to dig in to understand what happened. I just think the vast majority of people on the web aren't experiencing that big flip-flop. And yet we all pay attention to and worry and sit in stress and sit in front of our Google Search Console refreshing, which doesn't make a lot of sense because it's 48 hours delayed, right? So you're not going to know for a meaningful time if that matters to you.
Tory Gray is founder and CEO at Gray.co, and you can find her over at thegray.company. Tory, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thanks for having me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.